Hello, welcome to the 21st day of January 2022. My name is Kurt, and this is my Good Life Meditation. The Good Life Meditation is something that I do every day, first thing in the morning, to remind myself of my life objectives and principles, and to see how I did yesterday, applying these, and to plan for the coming day. So first, yesterday. Not much to speak of yesterday, just another very good steady long day at the grind, so to speak, at work. I was able to pretty much fulfill the objectives that I'd set out for myself in the morning, although those changed when I realized that the training manual that I was working on was missing three important elements that turned out to be pretty complicated. So I was able to work on one of those and complete those yesterday. Today's a Friday. I have no meetings today, so that's a very good opportunity to really dig in and get those other two in. With a little luck, I might even be able to record a training, a sample for that. This is good that this happened now before I did the recording. Not that the recording is permanent, it's just that the recording is the practice run for what will ultimately be the final product. You want to come up here, Ollie? Hold on just a second, boy. Here we go. Ollie likes to come up here and sit with me. Come on up. Come on. So, I had a really good talk with my wife at lunchtime. She and I, excuse me, now that we both work from home, we have lunch together and we walk the dogs to the dog park. We're lucky to live within walking distance of a nice dog park. So we had a really nice talk during our walk, and and then we had an evening. It was really nice. I like a television show called Midnight Diner. It's a Japanese show about a diner that's only open from midnight until 7 a.m. and run by a sole proprietor, a gentleman who has only really one food item on the menu, but he'll make anything you want if you ask, as long as he has the ingredients. And I was watching the show while Yumiko was cooking dinner, and I heard her kind of gasp, from the kitchen when she realized that and every episode of the show focuses on a particular meal. Usually it's a very something that very heartwarming meal. The type of thing that evokes memories of home. Home cooked meals, and the meal that Masta, who the owner of the restaurant, was making, nikujaga, which is a beef and potatoes stew, was the exact same meal that Yumiko was making that night. So I had the rare and privilege of watching my favorite show, an episode, watching Masta make jaga niku, or nikujaga, I said it backwards, while I could smell nikujaga coming from our own kitchen. That was nice. All right, I slept really well. I was in bed before 9, just gone. I did wake up in the middle of the night. Our new place has windows that backs up to a golf course. And we're right at the part of the golf course where there's a lake right there, and then the back end of the golf course extends into another range of the golf course, so it's kind of like a wilderness. And then the other edge at the other left butts right into the desert, and so coyotes roam. Geese and ducks are out on the lake, and lots of wildlife. And the moon was full, and I just stood there in the picture windows, and we don't have to worry about closing our drapes. There's no neighbors behind us. We're on the second floor anyway. Nobody could really see. If they were out there, if there was somebody walking on the golf course out there, all I could kind of do was see into an empty room, because I didn't even have the light on. So I just stood there with the waxing moon, 90% full, and reflecting over the landscape, desert mountains beyond, and reflecting off the water, ripples on the water, no wind, but ripples on the water, so some activity out there, some birds were tooling around or something, and just really soaked it up, really did like that. Let's begin. Excuse me. The Good Life meditation. The Good Life creed, that is, consists of 7 objectives and 30 principles, maybe 31. I've got my eye on a new one. Excuse me. These 7 objectives are: 1, to be always ready to die, to have my affairs, my relationships, and my mission in order, so that if death comes now, I'm ready to go. Go nowhere, of course, but go nonetheless. Number 2 is to make good and effective use of my time, to not waste my days. 3, to develop and maintain good and sound life principles. These are these 7 and 30 that I'm talking about now, which are cataloged in my book, Going Alone. There's a chapter called The Good Life. It's back here near the back, where I list all of these items, explain them. And the book provides the context of how they came about, the adventure, the experience of going alone into the wilderness, and then developing these objectives and principles as a result of what I found out there, or did not find more appropriately. Books available on Amazon or from my website, goingalone.org. If you buy it from the website, I'll sign it and send you some goodies along with it. Number 4, objective number 4, is the cultivation of good emotional reactions, which I'm really getting good at, by the way, if I do say so myself. Number 5 is to perform good actions, just to do good things. Number 6 is to recognize my true limits and my true opportunities, so that I live in accordance with these. And I do this all the time, especially at work. I face a situation and I ask myself, what are the parameters of my opportunity here? What are the realities of the limits? And then I act. I develop a plan that takes these into consideration. And then lastly, to do one thing at a time, and to do that thing slowly and deliberately. I'm getting very good at that as well, especially at work again. You know, like yesterday I was in a meeting. I was so tempted. I had some little slightly unfinished business. Everything's online, of course. Slightly unfinished business, and I really wanted to turn to that and do that, but no. Kept my focus. It was a deliberate action. Focus, hands, down. Focus on the camera, listening carefully to what was being said. Giving the person on the other end the respect that they deserved. It was actually a group meeting, so it would have been that much easier to slip aside, so to speak. I'm just one smaller little square in a Hollywood Squares, roundup. Okay, now my 30 principles. These are as follows, and these are in a particular order. These are arranged in order to build one upon the other. The first principle is the principle of war, to always fight against the things that I believe and the important propositions that others suggest I should believe, because I don't want to believe things that aren't true. Principle number 2 is reason, and the sub-principles of honesty, objectivity, and doubt. And wasn't I surprised? I'm reading a book by Aristotle. It's a collection of his essays that he used in teaching, and the book is called On the Nature of Man. But wasn't I surprised to read Aristotle describing roughly the same thing, that the components of reason were objectivity, honesty, and I don't think he said skepticism, doubt, but interesting to see that he had surmised the same. And I use reason to figure out what is true from what is fancy, especially with regard to the things that I believe, that I want to believe. like I'm having this deep war right now. I'm engaged in war with my own belief that free will is an illusion, because I can't rest my hat on that without some evidence. I literally hold that position as a position of faith, which in my worldview is faith is a sin. So I'm sinning against. I'm I'm engaged in sin to believe something because I just want to, because it seems to make sense, but seeming to make sense isn't good enough. It's good enough maybe from an operational perspective, but I would like to know more conclusively. Although I probably shouldn't spend too much time on this, because this is something that I don't think that there's any way to demonstrate one way or another. I'm certainly not clever enough to do it. I don't have a time machine to wind back to see if I could actually make a different decision. Anyway, than the one I made, any one that I make. So anyway, I'm trespassing on another principle which is coming up. So that was to make good and effective use of time. The next, no, was that right? No, war, reason. The next is the homunculus, the idea of a little mortal surviving on my own on a rock in the sea. And I had something happen yesterday that is kind of an illustration of that in a slight way. You know, I've actually got a drawing here. I haven't wiped it clean yet. So this is me standing on a rock in the sea, and there I am looking off in the distance, and there's another rock there, and somebody else standing on theirs on a placid sea. Sea is low, the sun is blazing. Yesterday in the evening, I had taken the dogs for a walk, and sometimes they want to come home soon. Usually I'll take them, try to see if I can get them to come up on the mountain with me, Mount Fortitude behind my house. But they didn't want to, so I took them back. So I went, which is kind of all right, because I could walk further on the mountain. So I got up, I took the dogs back, and then I went on my own, and I climbed Mount Fortitude. Enjoyed some time at the top. I had a flashlight with me, but I didn't use it. And the moon, though nearly full, was still below the horizon, so it was quite dark, and night had settled in. And I was picking my way back down along the ridge of the mountain, because I have to go up and then take a right. You reach kind of a trail at the top of the mountain, and then I take a right to go up Mount Fortitude, and if you take a left, it takes you along a ridge to another mountain. And I was picking my way carefully down the ridge towards the trail that would go down. Remember, I didn't have any light on. I was in the dark. And I briefly saw a light turn on, maybe half a mile ahead of me, along the same trail. There was someone else picking, I'm pretty sure it's her way, because I think it was a woman that I had seen earlier when I was walking the dogs. I had seen a car parked at the trailhead, and a woman by herself get out and go. And I remember the dogs had wanted to go back, so I turned back with the dogs. And when I came back and launched into the trail, I saw that car was still there. I didn't see anybody else on the mountain as the sun was going down, so she must have been climbing that mountain. A woman, maybe early 30s. And I saw the light come on ahead of me. And I thought, oh, there's someone else on the mountain. There's someone else on the trail. And they're coming this way. Now, they didn't know that I was there, because I had not used a light for the whole hike. And I had a moment of thought. I thought, And I was pretty sure it was that woman. And I thought, well, the first thing that went through my mind was the Anchorhold, right? There's me and there's she. She's off on, we're literally alone in a wilderness, kind of poking out of the sea, so to speak. And I thought that was interesting. It reminded me of the homunculus, the two mortals amidst the wilderness. And that's how we all are. I believe that even if I had met that woman on the mountain, we would still be separated by a wilderness void between us, which is the thing that separates my mortality from your mortality, or from everyone's mortality. So I enjoyed that thought. That was kind of fun. But then I kind of sobered up and I thought, well, wait a minute. If that is who I think it is, if it is that woman that I saw with the car, and she's picking her way down the mountain, how is she? And I'm not going to use a flashlight. And I thought, well, how's she going to react encountering me on the mountain? That's probably the very thing that gives her anxiety, is the idea that she might be ambushed by some strange man on the mountain. Heck, I even worry about it when I'm hiking up. That's one of the reasons I don't use the light necessarily, although I prefer to hike without a light. I do worry about being the light giving away my location. I like the anonymity, the isolation, the hiddenness that the darkness provides. So I thought, well, I'll turn my light on so that she'll know that I'm coming. Well, that's better, but still that's weird too. And I thought, well, what I'll just do is I'll just pick up the pace, and then if I can, I'll reach that trailhead, right? I'll get down to that trailhead that leads down the mountain before she does, in the dark, and I'll be well ahead of her. And then even if I need to turn my light on, it's a steep hill down, then at least she'll see the lights going the other way when she reaches it. So that's what I did. I shuffled on down and reached that trailhead. Now, she never turned the light back on, so I didn't know where she was at that point, but I was pretty sure I beat her. Well, I knew I beat her from the distance. I wasn't far from the trailhead at that time. And I made my way down, and I did not turn the light on for the aforementioned reasons, and I spilled out of the trailhead at the bottom. And it took me a while. I had to walk after I reached the trailhead. I had to walk along a road long road to get to the crosswalk to go into our neighborhood. And as I was getting ready to cross the street, I saw the lights go on in her car, which was parked right at the trailhead. So I knew she had made it back all right too. So anyway, long story about encountering another mortal in the wilderness, which I never do out in Siberia, of course. But anyway, there you go. The next principle is the Anchorhold, which I just talked about, which is the rock in the mountain, the rock in the sea, and then the illustration of the same thing in the mountains last night. And then after that comes purpose. Yeah, the principle purpose. My purpose is to be a family man, a good husband and father, to raise my daughter to maturity, and to be a good brother, son, friend, and member of my community. Also to live a life of virtue, where virtue is the improvement of well-being of thinking creatures in particular. And then my mission is to continue sharing my book, the message in my book, Going Alone. That was first 5. Now, principle number 6 is the atomic principle. Pardon me. Everything is made of atoms and molecules. And though I appear to be sound and solid today, very soon, especially after I die, this will all fall to pieces. It's already falling to pieces. Then comes the principle of nature. Everything has some particular nature, and it's good to keep that in mind when dealing with things in the world. Because if we know their nature, then they won't surprise us so much. After that comes the pirate ride, which is my principle that suggests that free will is an illusion, which I already talked about. I don't think we have free will. I think we can make any choice we want, but we could never make any choice other than the one that we actually made, as much of a riddle as that is. And that's why I don't like it, but I believe it anyway. Okay, after the pirate ride comes maturity. This principle consists of 2 sub-principles, which are wisdom and fortitude. We are mature when we remember our successes and failures in the past, and then we have the strength to further the former and not repeat the latter. Next comes the social principle. We humans need each other. We don't do well on our own for very long. Then comes public speaking. With this principle, I'm suggesting that we just be very careful with our words, that we speak little, speak quietly, use carefully chosen words that deliberately convey our meaning, and that we, of course, never, ever, ever gossip, never talk about other people in a way that we would be embarrassed if they heard us talking about them. Regarding this principle, I'm really surprised at how deep this one has become for me. This is a very important thing for me. It's not because I was a gossip before. I don't think I gossiped any more than anyone else. But as I did it before, I just knew it was it was a wrong thing. It was a sin. And now that I don't do it, it helps to, you know what it really does? It helps to quiet the sea. I'm starting to wonder if the state of this sea is relative to our state in the world. If the sea can be rough here for me and smooth for this person over here, relative to how we're engaging in life, I'll bet that's the case. Okay, next is the principle of temperance and the sub-principles of suffering, simplicity, and apathy. Temperance is our controlled consumption of anything. Work, play, food, drink, sex, entertainment, hobbies, anything at all. And we live a better life when we do have and engage in just in everything. Take everything in moderation. It's a simpler life, to be sure, and we suffer a little bit when we deny ourselves what we want. And there's a tool called apathy, which I keep meaning to move. I keep meaning to move it to the recognition of true limits and true opportunity. But apathy is the ability to adjust our expectations with regard to the things that are outside of our control, to not worry about them so much. Like Stilbo the Stoic emerging from the flames with a conqueror asking, "What have you lost?" And Stilbo responds, I have all my goods with me," when in fact his home had burned, his business had burned, his wife was dead, his children were dead, everything was gone. Yet his apathy allowed him to maintain that perspective. All of his goods were with him, which means that his internal structure of principles were sound and intact. And his apathy, his ability to be apathetic to the things that are outside of his control, namely the destruction of his world by forces outside of his control. Okay, moving on to, after temperance comes the horror show. Life is, in fact, a horror show. There's horror happening every day all around us, to ourselves, to our pets, to the animals that we interact with, and the animals out there in the wild. All life is, even inanimate life is a horror show, although it can't perceive it. Supernovas exploding, wiping out, solar systems. Anyway, I want to remember that because it helps me to take life more seriously and cultivate a more sober perspective. After the horror show comes the principle called that which must be borne, carried. And what we have to bear is the things in life that we take on that are important to us, like our responsibilities, our jobs, especially when the job is difficult. It's challenging raising children. It's challenging sometimes being a husband or a wife, a member of community. It's tough taking out the damn garbage sometimes. Yet we bear these things. We also bear the horror show and try to do something about it. And then after that comes, I'm glad I usually forget this one, or I put it out of place, the Feast of Offal. Offal being the waste and byproduct of the butcher's art, or maybe if not the waste, the stuff that the butcher can't readily sell, so he grinds up into sausage. We too have stuff that we can't sell, which is are the words and the attitudes and the sour looks that we give, and maybe the gesticulations when we have had enough, which upsets other people and causes them to more readily have had enough, and they do the same, and thus it spreads. So I try not to engage in the feast by first containing my upset, doing something else with it, and then when others, so I'm not spewing it out like that, and then when others do it around me, to not consume it, but use my apathy, my recognition of what is outside of my control, to give them some space, let them do their thing, not take it in, and carry on with my day. After the Feast of Offal comes distraction and another principle called agency and the great indifference. We spend our lives doing all kinds of things so that we don't have to see this, or namely what comes about an hour after this, when the night really settles in the deep desert and we're all alone and there's no fire and no flashlight and no companions. And we're facing a universe devoid of company and companionship. We're just on our own in a moonscape with the cold of night settling in. That is I call that the great indifference. Well, not that itself, but what is not behind that. It's the emptiness. And we distract ourselves so we don't have to see that. So I try not to distract myself so that I can see that, and so that I can, live a more deliberate life. After that comes the best seat in the house, to not want to be anyone else or be anywhere else or be doing anything else, but to be okay with who I am, where I am, and what I'm doing at all times. And while nevertheless striving to make things better. Next comes the Path of Wildness. The Path of Wildness is easy to find. It's a course of a stream, leaves blown in the wind, a beast's track through the brush, and the direction of our first inclination. It's what we do when we want to have a change in life, but we feel like we're stuck. We don't know how to proceed. And we can collect some facts, give ourselves some time to think about it, and then make a decision. And if more time is needed, we can give ourselves that, and then try to make a decision. We don't want to do that indefinitely. Eventually a decision should be made. So after maybe 2-3 times of that, I will make a decision based on the facts that I've collected, and then decided with my gut what was my first inclination on this subject, and then go from there and leave it at that. Not expecting necessarily that this method always leads to the successful or best conclusion. Sometimes it leads me off the edge of a cliff, but at least I'm moving forward. At least I'm getting into new life. I'm not stagnating, which is its own reward. Not stagnating is its own reward. Okay, that was the Path of Wildness. Now comes the risk of avoiding risk. There's the surface level risks in life, which are education, a job, a spouse, family, kids, a home, of course, and saving for retirement. 6. There's more, but you get the idea, right? This is the stuff that society sanctions, right? If society was to come up with the game of life, right? These would all be things on the game of life. What's not necessarily sanctioned is finding oneself, living your dream. Although we play lip service to these ideas, and we don't actively encourage them because they tend to distract us from the surface level risks. My principle here, the principle of the risk of avoiding risk, is that there's a great risk if you are one who is so inclined and so interested in having that deeper experience. There is a great risk in avoiding that, in not engaging in that, especially early in life. And I'm talking in the decade of the 20s, because it will likely come back to haunt you later when you are in a worse position to do anything about it. And I'm talking about Mid-50s, really every decade it gets harder, but mid-50s and after, it's going to get really tough. And we might wind up just sulking into our old age, having missed our chance. Because when we get older, we not only lose our motivation, our brains start to falter more slowly and quickly for some than others, but we also become more irrelevant to society. Young people, the young kind of dismiss the old. So even if you have something of interest to experience and to do, you're probably not going to because you're old and weak and scared and timid. And even if you've got the resources, it's just I've just never done that. So you're not practiced in it. But even if you do find some treasure out there, no, very few are going to listen because you're old. Nobody gives a damn. So do it when you're young. Do it in your 20s when you can come back to get an education in the early 20s, and then come back, have your adventure. Come back to us at age 30 and bruised, battered, scarred, broke, maybe even dead. And what a life that might have been, hey? But if you make it back, what stories you'll tell, what a life you'll live. You'll have that centerpiece of your life in place, which comes later when I talk about the Path of Wildness. I'm sorry, the Great Life Adventure, which is coming up. That's sin, and that's the risk of avoiding risk. Next is sin and damnation. In my simple worldview, there are 7 sins, and these are falsity, being untrue; credulity, an overeagerness to believe; hope, which is desire uncoupled from action; faith, which is belief founded on belief; superstition, which is a category of belief that is, by categorical reference, is nonsense, or most likely nonsense; authority, which is the belief based on the weight of somebody's apparent credibility; and then dogma, which is belief because it's the blessed tradition. And then lastly, is this 8? Did I do 8? I think it's 8. Lastly, gossip, of course, as I mentioned and expounded upon at length already. So that's sin and damnation. Next is complete oblivion. This principle is my reminder that death is permanent and absolute. There is absolutely no evidence that we have a soul, and there's no reason to think that that any part of us lives on after death, other than our constituent molecules and atoms, which will dissolve away or be burned up or decompose or whatever the heck, and go off into the universe. If we get cremated, then some of it goes into heat and smoke and energy, sound and ash, dissolving up into space, the heat. But none of this. When the biology shuts down, all evidence suggests that this consciousness, this homunculus trapped behind the skull, within the skull, winks out, and we are gone, utterly, completely. There's my dad up there on the shelf. There he is. He's been dead 30 years. I'll never see him again. He is utterly, absolutely gone. And when I die, I will be utterly, absolutely gone. The sober fact of this reminds me that this is during life. This is the only chance to reunite with those that I've lost touch with, who I need to have, or I want to have a connection with, to reconcile with them, with anyone, if I've sour terms with somebody. This harkens back to being always ready to die, having my relationships in good order, and then finally to this justice, to seek justice in the living, in the here and now. Because if there is no afterlife, then there will be no justice in an afterlife. So complete oblivion. This life appears to be the only one we're going to get. So I'm going to make the best of it. Now, after complete oblivion comes the Great Life Adventure, which I kind of already talked about. That experience in our during the decade of our 20s, and we can have more of them later. That really becomes the centerpiece of our lives. The next principle is the season of philosophy. I like to talk about the muse, which is not my idea. It's a patent concept, but the little voice whispering in your ear that whisper some words, and you're like, wow, okay, I gotta write those down. It's true. It really happens. I mean, if you read through literature, author after author describes. It doesn't have to be literature, poetry especially, describes the muse coming to them. I remember one author I remember reading who grew up very poor in the South, describing how she would be working in the fields, and she could feel the words coming to her across the valley, and she would run, drop everything. She'd run back to the house to get her pen and paper so that when the words arrived, she could get them down, because she knew that they would spill on after that, like a wind coming through the valley. That's my experience too. It's exactly like that. I can't tell you how many times I've pulled my motorcycle off to the side of the road to write down words that have popped into my head that I have to get down before they're gone. And in my book, Going Alone, I distinguish those. So there's the normal prose writing, such as you see here, which is in normal non-italics. And then there's these vast sections here that are, all of this is in italics, in shorter, briefer sections, separated by these little tildes, right? Marks. These are all, anything like this in the italics, these are the words of the muse. This is stuff that came to me, and it's page after page of that stuff. It doesn't come to me anymore. So I wrote them down while I had the chance. That's why I created this principle of the season of philosophy, because the well goes dry, and if you don't write it down when the words were there, then you'll likely never get them back. Or if they do come, they'll be different. And if you do wait, they'll be different. They'll have lost the vigor. Another characteristic of those words is that they require no editing. They literally, the way they are in the book is exactly how they came to me. It's this astonishing thing. And I don't believe there's any supernatural agency. I don't think there's actually some muse out there. I think it's just the circumstances within the brain become kind of in such a state that it just comes out. Last thing on this. This book's gone through, it took me 3 years to write, and it's taken me another almost going on 4 years now of editing. Editing was the harder part by far. Though every time I edit, I go through, I read the whole book, and I write things up, I change things. I can probably count maybe 3 or 4 times in all that effort that the muse pieces have changed, because they came out finished the first time. Can't quite explain it. That's one of the reasons why I go to the desert to write, because the muse speaks to me out there, or at least she used to. Okay, after the season of philosophy comes, we're almost done. The bullseye aim. Just a reminder that we strive to hit the mark, and we usually miss. So well. Sometimes completely miss the target. Sometimes we let's go with a knife and we go backwards and it goes the other way. So it dampens my expectations of hitting the bullseye. Next is the bullseye aim, the uphill climb. Life is a steady uphill climb. The higher we get, the better the view gets. It's tough, and it's cold, and it's windy, but look at the stars. Next is arena and utility. Life is an arena for the development of our principles that we can use in the execution of a good life. 2 more. The next is nothing is enough. Just a little reminder that there's so much more life to be had in having nothing or very little. It doesn't mean we have to live in a box or live in the desert. But when I want to fill my space with time, well, shall I engage? Shall I tinker, or shall I just go for a walk? Which is my best version of nothing. And then after nothing is enough, the very last principle is the principle of fun. Just a reminder to have fun. That life isn't all this seriousness all the time, but can be a good time as well. Good, safe, clean fun that doesn't engage in any of the aforementioned sins. That's my good life meditation for today. Now let's forecast the day and get started. Today, as I already mentioned, is a Friday where I work. Every Friday, half the organization has it off. We have Fridays off, alternating Fridays off. So half the organization's in. I have no meetings today. I also work an hour less today, half hour less in the morning, half hour less in the afternoon. I am looking forward to a very productive day. I am going to kick butt today. I'm going to get those 2 sections in the training manual and maybe even record a piece of it. Everything's in pretty good shape. And then I have some books that I need to send out to mail to some books. This book to send to people. So I got to do that. And then in the evening, I'll look forward to a nice evening with the family. And that's my good life meditation. That's my day. That was my last night. And here we go. I wish you all the best. Maybe be safe, but not too safe. Take care.